Welcome everybody. It's episode 358 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, joined today by the Phil Foden of Irish MMA Media, Graham McDonald, as we talk about a massive night in the world of mixed martial arts that went down on Saturday night. Two title fights. Ian Gary fought Chimaev versus Burns. We'll go over all of that, and there was much more as well on a very noteworthy card that went down. We'll look ahead to next week as well. There's a big Bellator card going on. I will throw it over to Sean Sheehan and Graham McDonald to talk about that later on, and as well Luque versus Muhammad, which is an interesting fight as well. So a jam-packed edition of the Severe MMA podcast today. And before we get into all of that, we must tell you that, fellas, have you started your spring cleaning yet? The carpets need cleaning, the drapes need dusting, and your lawn needs mowing. Spring has sprung, and the global leaders in below-the-waist grooming have the best tools for cleaning aisle 5 in your pants. Time to clear out the winter bush and join the 4 million women worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code SEVEREMMA. Manscaped has a full package for your spring cleaning needs this year. The Performance Package 4.0 is the only tool you will need to keep your boys looking and smelling like fresh tulips that your partner wants. To start off spring cleaning, use the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer to get the most precise shave on your hedges. Do we mention it's waterproof as well? You need not worry about watering the grass on your tools this week. Equipped with an LED light so you know it's a major asset to the new shower routine. Clear the holes and smell this spring with the Weed Whacker. Also, it's a nose and ear hair trimmer with the proprietary skin-safe technology which helps prevent nicks, snags and tugs in those delicate holes. Also included, the Crop Preserver is an anti-chafing ball deodorant to moisturizer, and the Crop Reviver is a spray-on toner for your balls so you can keep them from sticking to your leg and fresh like the flowers of spring. Finish off your grooming routine with the Plow 2.0, the perfect razor for the finest shave in your face. I need one of these, lads. Manscaped, throw me on one of these. Because it's your Lawnmower 4.0 is for your balls, it's not for your face. You're doing it wrong if you're using it in both of them. Sure. The start of spring also marks Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. In April, Manscaped is partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer, men's health and early cancer detection. Manscaped is committed to raising awareness for the most common form of cancer in men aged 15 to 35 and giving support for fighters, survivors and families impacted by testicular cancer as part of their We Shave Balls initiative. Smell also fresh and so clean this spring. And check yourself before you wreck yourself. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code SEVEREMMA at manscaped.com. It's 20% off and free shipping with that code SEVEREMMA at manscaped.com. It's time to throw out your old hygiene habits and upgrade your life with Manscaped. Right, Graham? Let's get
so fresh and so clean.
So fresh, very fresh, very clean, beautiful. Manscaped. God bless you all. We appreciate the sponsorship, and we appreciate what they're doing as well for obviously the Testicular Cancer Awareness Month and all. It's very, very good. Very good. Fair play to them. There was a lot of balls on show, Graham, last night. There was a lot of balls on show. I'm getting straight into Chimaev versus Burns. I don't care. No bollocks in here. Look, when that fight was going on, when that fight was just over, we'll rethink about it further down the line, but I'm not ready for that at the moment. I thought that was one of the most exciting fights I've ever seen. It was, you use that word jeopardy, and you've been using an awful lot for the last year or so. This was just full of jeopardy from the second it started. It was like someone was being up in court and they were about to get like the guilty or not guilty, like is he hyped or is he real kind of thing. And I never bought into that in terms of if you lose to Gilbert Burns, you can still be a very, very good fighter because he's very, very good. As we saw last night, Chimaev could have lost him and he's still a very good fighter. I think win or lose last night, he proved he's a very good fighter. But this was one of those ones like, is he going to win? Is he going to do it? Is Burns going to land that big shot in him? Is Burns just going to get destroyed in there? And God, he Dam did not get destroyed in there anyway. It was a very even, very close, very fun fight. One of my favourite fights instantly. And it was just before it, I think, that they announced Cub Swanson versus the Korean Superboy was going into the Hall of Fame. And it was a different sort of fight, but it was a similar sort of edgier seed fight. You just couldn't take your eyes off it for 1 second. Just didn't know what was going to happen throughout it all. And that's what we want from MMA, isn't it? I loved it so much. Were you as big a fan of it as I was?
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. Like, and as you said, it seemed like either man could fall at any moment. They were, even when, Chimaev was hit with a big shot, or Burns was hit with a big shot and rocked, they were both still coming back with big shots and laying it all on the line, and both showed huge chins, like loads of questions answered about Chimaev, especially in that second round. We'd seen a lot of them destroying people, but we hadn't the sample size of the actual time in the cage, and the statistic that was going around that he got hit with one punch so far before this fight in his UFC career. So this was a completely different fight for him. This was like what we've been waiting for from Chimaev, the questions to be answered. And he maybe he didn't blow through the opponents like he has been before, but in the past. But Burns is like a real tough test and really put it up to him, and asked a lot of questions to Chimaev, and Chimaev just about had the answers in terms of the scorecard. And it's a really good development fight as well for Chimaev to look back on and to work on. And Burns really, there's no taking away from him, even though he lost a decision here. I'm sure he's gained a lot of fans, and that fight will be remembered for a long time.
Yeah, and even the way it started with Chimaev sitting on top of the cage before the fight even started, it was just brilliant. He's so, like, there's no one as cocky as Chimaev. People always talked about McGregor being cocky and confident and stuff. I don't think there's anyone like Chimaev ever in terms of...
it feels natural. Like, we've seen people try to do it and it doesn't feel natural. It feels a bit cringe or a bit, this is forced. But with Chimaev, it seems to be the real personality coming out.
It does. He's just... You couldn't be the fighter he is without being that confident. I think, it blends into his fighting style, but it's definitely so natural, and it nearly worked against him here on in this fight throughout it. Like, I started taking notes, and about halfway through round one, I just forgot about it because I got into central in the fight. But there was an early takedown from Chimaev, and I think everyone was probably, going at that stage, oh shit, is this going to be him just dominating again? But, he was landing the better shots, and Burns ended up getting up. And he was countering him, even if he wasn't landing the biggest shot, Burns, he was throwing counters and he was live in there, and it was a live fight. Chimaev knocked him down with a jab at one stage. Burns went for an armbar, didn't manage to get it. It hurt him again, I thought, late in the fight with a jab, and Chimaev definitely won the first round. But then all I have in my notes for the second round is pure insanity. Like, Burns was winning the round, wasn't a mile away. Look, it's hard to score because it's so insane, but he knocked him down like right at the end of the second round, even though Chimaev popped back up and hit him with a hard shot as well. But I thought Burns won the second round. Like, that shot that he landed with, I think it was like a check right hook, if I'm not mistaken, when he landed a couple of shots at the same time, knocked Chimaev down, and he face planted. Like, that could have been that could have been it. And I said it, I think it was on the preview show or maybe on the show we did, that the one thing I wanted to see from the fight was Chimaev hit. This statistic, as you mentioned, he's only been hit one time in the UFC. That's not a good statistic because he hasn't proven that he can get through it. He hasn't proven he can get through a war. He can take a shot, which is something you have to prove in the UFC. You're not going to live for free forever. And he did that. He absolutely did it. He came out, won the first half of the third round. It was a very close third round. I know some people had it for Burns, but Gilbert got very tired, midway through the third round. I think Chimaev noticed that and decided to kind of down his pace a little bit to try to pick his shots to maybe get the finish. And I think it worked against him because Burns got a fourth wind and came back and started throwing hard shots anyway. I don't necessarily think he landed a lot of those hard shots, and I think that's why Khamzat won it. Khamzat landed nice. I think it was an uppercut and another left hand maybe, or something anyway, towards the end of the third round. I think that was enough for him to take it. But all in all, it was crazy. Did you have it for Khamzat, and was there anything throughout the fight that stood out for you?
Yeah, I had it for Chimaev as well, first and the third, but the third was close. If Burns had landed one of those kind of haymakers that you mentioned he was throwing at the end, maybe it would have swung the round, and maybe that's what he was thinking. But if he had just kind of taken a bit of heat off the shots, and he might have been able to land a shot, and it was a close enough round that he could have stolen the fight in the round, or the round in the fight with a big shot. So he obviously is going for it, and he's very tired. And even at one stage, I wasn't sure if he was exhausted or if he was rocked in the third round as well. So yeah, I think Chimaev did just enough, but I think if you're giving that fight to Burns, I think it's the wrong decision.
Yeah, I think the right guy definitely won, but both guys exit as winners in my mind. It was brilliant. I'd love to see the rematch, honestly. I think the rematch actually makes
5 rounds.
sense. Yeah, 5 rounds. There's talks of Chimaev versus Colby next to one of those ABC cards that are coming up. Look, it'll be a great fight, and I would absolutely love to see it. But where I am right now, I just want to see Chimaev versus Burns again. Even I've been advocating for Chimaev versus Usman for a while, and look, I think he probably does need another fight before he gets that one now. Based on what we've seen last night, he could do with another war. He could do with another maybe fight where he's preparing for someone that good, and maybe it can be more dominant for him. Whether that's Colby or whether that is Burns. But how do you think a Colby fight will go down? Like I'm interested because Colby's wrestling is unbelievable. Obviously, we've seen Chimaev's wrestling be unbelievable, but Chimaev's striking might be on another level to Colby. So how do you think it'll go?
Yeah, Chimaev mentioned he was tired after that in his post-fight interview, and he definitely has really good cardio, but Colby has insane cardio and has gone 5 rounds multiple times, and it's kind of his game. So whose wrestling will be better? It's really hard to know. Like I'd probably, I don't know, I'd need to look more into that and study that fight more. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is, like, before this fight and now, is Chimaev better or as good or not as good at this stage as you thought? Or do you think it's hard to make an evaluation because he kind of threw down more than maybe he should have?
I think it's hard to see someone go in there and fight Gilbert Burns, who is one of the top welterweights in the world, and win in like his first test and not say he's better than what we thought before. Because, okay, look, you actually can't get better than the perception of Chimaev before. Because the perception of Chimaev was he's untouchable, just a destroyer with his hands, a destroyer on the ground, destroyer in his wrestling. So, like, it was almost all, and look, unless he took Chimaev down, submitted him in 15 seconds, you couldn't have increased his value or increased his reputation, I think. But if you were to think about it, like, and actually sit back and assess it, and a lot of people weren't, and I'm glad I was on the right side of it beforehand, because I said respect Gilbert Burns. I said it in that preview show. I said it everywhere. I was saying, I was doing on the betting show, talking about how that betting line was way too much, and I avoided it and I stayed away from it because I respect Gilbert Burns. And I think if you respect Gilbert Burns and you know how good he is, then Chimaev is better than he was before, or should be perceived as better than he was before, because he went in there, he went toe to toe with him, and he ended up winning at the end of the day. And if you're to do that in your 10th fight against the third best welterweight in the world, that is unbelievable. Like, that to me is just insane. As I said, maybe he needs another fight. If he goes in there and he beats Colby, how can you deny him a fight with Usman after that? That'd just be absolutely insane altogether. So for me, his stock went up. What do you think? Do you think it went up or down?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, it went up, but in the terms of the kind of thing you were talking about, where the fans have a lot of fans have jumped on the hype train and kind of made him out to be this unstoppable force that's just going to tear through everything. So in terms of that, I think they're probably maybe cooling the jets a little bit and thinking that Usman fight, or maybe it's not as clear cut as we thought. Maybe it's not just a matter of time, because, like, as good as Chimaev looked there, I'm still picking Usman Usman to beat him if they were to fight, like, 6 months time or whatever. But Chimaev's 11th fight as a pro, his first huge his first big step up to the upper echelon of the division, and a fantastic fight as well in terms of entertainment and in terms of jeopardy and excitement and answering questions and all that. So yeah, he's probably, in my opinion, he's shown that he is what everybody, or what me and you or most people thought he was. But for the fans, maybe, as you said, this guy who's going to go in and smash everybody is probably, maybe he will in the future in a few fights' time, but he's not quite ready, I don't think.
I think it's I would tend to agree. I think it's about the moment as well for Chimaev, because if we look back at this fight in 5 years' time, we mightn't kind of understand how important it was, if you get me. It's a very much a proving fight for Chimaev at this time of his career, and watching it live, I think watching it back in 5 years, we'll still think it's a good fight, but you'll never be able to get back what happened last night and the reaction I think people were having to it live, because it was literally, you were seeing a guy being proven live before your eyes, which is something we talk all the time about, and we'll talk about Ian Gary next year, but we talk about guys improving, guys showing changes in their game and going from a fighter at 4 or 5 fights into their career to a champion worthy fight maybe in another 10 to 15 fights or whatever. We saw progression in Chimaev in minutes last night. We saw it in reality right in front of us, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
One thing I'll just say, can I reiterate, is for his team and him, that's a great fight to go back 100%. And improve even more. It's great going out there, smashing everybody, getting the hype behind you, but fights like that are the ones you really learn from. And obviously he got asked a lot of questions by Gilbert Burns, and he answered most of them, but there's definitely, he said it himself in the post-fight interview, is definitely a lot tougher than he expected it to be. So these are, minutes in the cage that will stand to him. It's easy to forget how kind of young in the UFC and young in his career he is.
100%. I was watching the fights of Patrick last night, and he said it reminded him a little bit of McGregor versus Diaz 1, and the same thing didn't happen with him getting finished, but it was a little bit like that, this unbelievably cocky, sure fighter that knew everything and was never going to get beaten and never going to get hit, and suddenly it all goes wrong for him in a way. Now, McGregor wasn't able to survive it, but the second time, obviously, he did come back, but Chimaev was able to turn that tide early, and I think, that kind of shows how special he is, and I can't wait for what happens next. Let's talk about Ian Gary, as I mentioned. It wasn't as impressive a performance from Ian Gary, but it was a valuable time in that cage. 15 minutes for a guy very, very young in his career. Okay, I think himself and Chimaev are both 10-0 now, is that correct? But it's obviously have taken very different trajectories. And
I think Chimaev is 11-0 and Gary's 9-0.
9. Okay, sorry. Well, how did I get that so badly wrong? But anyway, they're relatively close enough. But there's no harm. People need to realise as well, everyone's not Chimaev, and Ian Gary's probably ahead of most everyone else at that rate in their career. So count the jets on that one. First of all, it was the thing I would take for this, if you're looking at positives for this, Ian Gary got a dominant win. I think one judge gave him the week's one round. I don't know where he got that from, but to me, he basically won every second of the fight without looking spectacular. But the one thing I think that Ian Gary would be happy with in that fight more than anything else is that in his UFC debut, and he said it to me in an interview, and he said it in other places as well, that he saw Bruce Buffer and he saw his name up in lights, and he kind of, it wasn't that he panicked, but he kind of, it was the opposite maybe. He got too relaxed, and he's like, oh, I'm here, I'm in the UFC, my dream is ready, here I go, let's go out and pick up this win. And then, 4.5 minutes later, he was after getting pucked in the face about 10 times from Jordan Williams, and he's like, oh shit, I better start fighting. And look, he ended up getting the finish and all, but as he said himself, to quote Ian Gary himself, it was a shit performance. Last night certainly wasn't that. He came out there and you see him from the very start. He was on it. He wasn't looking up at the lights. He wasn't looking at Bruce Buffer. He was on it. He was in that fight from the very, very start and did what he needed to do to beat someone like Weeks. I'll shout out the previous show again, but that was a fight. For anyone who went back and watched Weeks as I did, that you knew it was going to go long, because Weeks is very, very defensive as a fighter to me. He stands on the outside. He doesn't throw much. He doesn't give you many chances. And he has that wrestling base as well. That's a threat to not want you to come in. So Gary did exactly what he needed to do. He stayed on the outside. He threw his jab. He threw nice 1-2s. He defended a couple of takedowns in the first round. In the second round, I thought his 1-2s down the middle were absolutely beautiful. Just walked away with that round. And it wasn't a case of Gary like overwhelming him or destroying him or anything like that, but the fact that Weeks barely landed a shot. He landed one shot, I think, that bloodied the nose of Gary. It seems like Ian Gary's nose being bloodied, it might be an issue for him as well. It seems to be bloodied in every fight at this stage, but I think in the third round, Gary looked even better. I think he grew into the fight and looked better as the fight went. Faster hands, and hurt Weeks badly at one stage. But look, it wasn't a spectacular performance. It wasn't one of these ones where the hype is going to grow, but you know what? That might not be a bad thing at all. Ian Gary got 15 minutes against a good, tough test, and as I think Paul Felder said it, who was phenomenal on the commentary last night. The commentary, spectacular, 100% the best UFC pay-per-view commentary in years. Absolutely brilliant. But he said it's like, this is the sort of fight we need to see young fighters. Now maybe it was even Rogan who said it. This is the sort of fight we need to see young fighters in. Got a good, tough 15 minutes. Not the most spectacular. There's probably people listening to this going, oh, your boy, he was rubbish and all like that. And that's, do you know what? That's what he needs. Because Ian Gary doesn't need people patting him on the back. He doesn't need people telling him he's the best in the world. He needs, he probably needs people telling him he's fucking shit. Which I'm sure there will be. And he obviously isn't. But that, sometimes pats in the back and you're the best in the world and let's go champ are not what some people need, and then to get to the next level and to improve. And look, that's what Ian Gary's doing. He's in one of the best gyms in the world, in my opinion, probably the best gym in the world if you look at the amount of talent that's there right now, and he's going to be improving all the time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next for him. But on last night, Graham, I know I'm probably a bit of bias here and I'm taking the positives, but sometimes we do tend to overreact, and sometimes we do tend, as Nolan King kind of said last night on Twitter, we expect every Irish prospect to be the next Conor McGregor. I thought Ian Gary put on a performance last night that was steady, smart, intelligent, and something like McGregor might do later in his career, rather than earlier in his career. But I was impressed, while obviously not being blown away, but I think it was good. What was your kind of take on the fight?
Yeah, I think it was, great to have the 15 minutes in the cage, great learning experience, great stuff to go back with the team and work on. And, if you listen to Ian all week or all month or, all camp, he's been talking about learning all the time. I still have loads to learn. He must have said it 100 times in various interviews and things like that. So that's great to hear. That's what you want to hear. And, fights like this where maybe it doesn't go your own way, maybe you get off to a little bit of a slow start again. Nothing really coming back his way, bar, whatever bloodied up his nose. I didn't even see what shot landed, but it didn't look like much. It just seemed to hit the right spot to bloody the nose. So, I wouldn't worry about that too much. His opponent didn't really want to exchange with him. Weeks seemed happy enough to lose a decision, which is a hard fight to kind of, for Ian Gary to kind of, look good in. And he didn't look bad or anything, but he maybe wasn't as impressive as people are expecting. People, you said the Conor McGregor thing, and then like even on like social media, Reddit and stuff, there's like, oh, this guy's nothing like McGregor. It's like, nobody's like, you guys are the only people saying that. Obviously, like, he's his own individual. He's taking a different path. He's very young in the game. He's very young altogether, like in age. And, fights like this will really, really stand to him. And I think his corner advice is very good. I think in between the second round and the third round, where they told him to stop trying to knock him out basically and just try to touch him and, just get the jab in his face and the shots will come. And once he started doing that, he got into the flow more and, looked more dominant than before. And I think, he could have been fighting Darian Weeks for weeks, and he wouldn't have been in danger. So some good stuff to go back and work on, and really valuable in cage time in the UFC at such a young stage. It's like 9-0, started fighting only a few years ago. Like this guy shouldn't be expected to be in there blitzing everybody. It's going to take time, and we've seen it with loads of fighters over the years. If you give them time, they can blossom. If you put them in against tough opponents too early, then it can stunt them. And hopefully, not selfishly for like kind of the plan we laid out from a few years ago on the podcast of kind of taking it slow, and obviously he's in the UFC now and he's not exactly taking it slow, but I think he's merited to be there, but taking it slow while in the UFC, hopefully the matchmakers are looking at that, and they seem to be for the first two fights kind of putting him on a path like we used to see with Joe Silva and Sean Shelby back in the day. So yeah, maybe it's good for him that he didn't go out there and knock out Darian Weeks and end up in a bigger fight too quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I would tend to agree with everything you said there. And one point as well I must make about Ian Gary, because it feels like, Henry Cejudo tweeted about it afterwards. He's like, I'm not the king of cringe anymore, it's Ian Gary. And I saw a lot of fans like tweeting that during the week as well. And it was funny because I did the interview with him and it came out like before all the 5 week stuff, and everyone was kind of saying like, oh, it's great to hear kind of the old Ian Gary back and everything like that. I wonder is a little bit like McGregor in that when he's talking to someone Irish, he sounds one way, but when he's talking to someone American and he's in front of a big crowd and things like that, it sounds another way. Because back in the day, listening to like Connor's interviews with Andrew or with yourself or something, I think they always sounded more, they always sounded better and more natural and things. And look, that's going to be
less soundbitey, more just kind of natural conversation.
Yeah, and I don't think that is good for like the up and coming Irish fighters, all of them. And it's not just Ian Gary, because everyone's just going to say, oh, you're trying to be Conor McGregor. And like, every fighter, look, everyone says it now, I'm going to be a world champion, I want to be the best, I want to, and it's hard not to say that, because that's probably what they're saying to themselves all day, every day. That's probably what their goals are in life and everything like that. But when the fans hear that, they're just thinking, oh, not this again, And I think Ian Gary is one of those lads who has a lot of different things to say, but when questions are getting thrown at him like that and they're all like the same questions over and over and over again, it can absolutely do that. And I think he's very much done the right thing since between his UFC debut and this fight. He hasn't really been on social media that much, except like his normal everyday life and things like that. He hasn't done that many interviews and all. And I think that's the way to go for him. I said that in the preview show as well. I think he is a guy who, as you said, the UFC are matchmaking him the right way, or seem to be so far anyway. And I think he has made the right decisions in terms of his training, for one. With no disrespect to Team K for a very good camp as well, but he picked a very good camp after he left him, is what I'm saying. And he's done the right thing with kind of staying out of the limelight, not being 100% in at all times, like, someone like a Paddy Pimblett or others as well. He has really stuck to the training and done that. And I think if you're one of those people out there thinking, Ian Gary, he's saying this over and over, and people say that about Kiefer Crosby, and they say it about James Gallagher, and I'm sure they say about John Mitchell, and they say it about every up and coming fighter. And I'm sure, it's a thing we're going to have all the time, because look, a lot of fighters are like McGregor in terms of the things they say, and they think, they can copy him and be like him. I don't think Ian Gary's one of those necessarily, but all of them want to be a champion. They want to be the best. They want to be the guy. And when they're asked about it and they say it, we can be surprised sometimes about it, but I think it's a thing we kind of have to understand a little bit better, maybe, as well as people covering the sport and as fans of the sport. But I think that's something he's going to have to maybe deal with. Because I said it when he signed for the UFC, and I think you said it as well, Graham, that like, it's in Cage Warriors all around, it's very much support. Everyone's like, this is going to be the next prospect. This is going to be the next guy. Can't wait for him to get to the UFC. And that's not just Ian Gary. That's Paul Hughes. That's Charrier. That's Tarilla. That's everyone. And then they get to the UFC and suddenly they're like, they're all hype. They're next Conor McGregor. They're a wannabe and all of this.
Yeah, I do agree with you. But do you think in Ian's case that some of the kind of ill will or people turning off him is to do with the split from the gym?
I think the fact that he's not in Ireland doesn't help him at all. And I asked him about that, and he doesn't reckon it is, but that can be changed very quickly. We see how fickle fans are. If he was to fight in Ireland, or if he was to get a few wins in a row, I think people would probably forget that, to be honest. But I don't think it's necessarily the split. I think in hardcore MMA fans, it probably is that. But I think with just like Irish MMA fans in general who mightn't, know anything about Chris Fields or Tom King, other than probably knowing Chris Fields off of Tough or whatever, or from
They probably don't even know anything happened. Yeah.
Exactly. They're just thinking, he relocated, he'd fallen out with his gym, and that was that. It happens, it happens with everyone. It happened with John Jones, it happened with, loads of people. They probably don't know. So, I think it's more that there is kind of a disconnect there. There's more, look, the fact I said earlier on, he hasn't been on social media as much. He hasn't been doing interview after interview after interview, which might be harming him now, but in the long term, myself and Harry talked about it in Speaker's Corner a few episodes ago, that acquisition of skills. He's better off spending his time doing that than he is doing interviews with bums like me and you, Graham. So, although, keep doing interviews with me, it's like he's won every fight now, and he's talked to me before every fight. So, am I fucking, good luck charm? I know I talked to McGregor before his fight with Cowboy as well. He won that. I didn't talk to him before the fight after. You'll
have to start walking him out just to make sure.
Put me in that corner. And also, congratulations, Ian and Layla, his wife, who are expecting a baby. He announced it afterwards as well. So, what a fucking change in his life. He's moved to America, left his old gym, started a new gym. Got married, no baby on the way.
Life comes at you fast.
In the UFC, Lord Almighty. I don't envy him. I don't envy him all of that, but congratulations and fair play, and I'm looking forward to seeing Ian Gary next time out. Right. Let me run through the prelims here, and then we will get to the two big title fights. Arce versus Santos was a win there for Julio Arce.
Jab.
Yeah. And Octagon Control, anyone who tells me Octagon Control wins fights, look at this one. It absolutely didn't in this one. Piera Rodriguez won her fight as well. She got a few takedowns from Hansen in the first. It was close. Rodriguez got the back late in the second. Another close round, probably 1-1 after that. Early takedown for Rodriguez in the third, and she dominated the rest of the round. Very little in terms of effective grappling or striking for either girl there. Not a great fight. Alexianic versus Vandara. Alnick was just throwing bombs early in this one. Jared landed a straight right down the middle, and Alexianic ended up pulling guard. Jared hit him with a bit of ground and pound, but he took the back almost at one stage. But
it looked like he was kind of hurt and gave it the back, and it looked like it might have been a submission against Olenek, but he's just so wily on the ground, and he just has crazy kind of old school ways of reversing, and he's happy to kind of be on his back. He's from an older generation that we don't really see anymore, where getting hit and ending up on your back isn't necessarily the worst thing.
Yeah, 100%. He ended up getting the back himself. Then he got into mount, and then he transitioned into the side control to get the scarf hold, and that was that. And there was a great video afterwards of him showing Vandara how to do. I don't think he was showing him how to do the scarf hold necessarily, but he was showing him how to do the Ezekiel choke, and it was great to see afterwards. So fair play. Garl versus Mallet then. Gal was getting hit a bit early, got a takedown, no good. Malik got back up, and then he slept him with a clean left hook after a couple of right hands. Ref was a bit slow, I think, to finish that. I wouldn't mind seeing Mallet versus Gary. What do you think of that one?
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, I think that's a good fight. As I said, I don't want anything moving too fast, so I think that makes a lot of sense.
Let's do it. Ladd versus Pennington. Round one was slow, but then they kind of got into it. Rocky was winning early, then Ladd was winning. Not a great fight, to be honest. Ladd got a takedown in the third one that round, 2-1 to Rocky. That was all you need to know. Fluffy Hernandez versus Frimmed. What a fight this was. A massive page from Hernandez early. Nearly got a couple of guillotines. Frimmed was landing shots though, and I thought Mark
so many choke attempts.
So many choke attempts, yeah.
He's like, I am choking this guy, and it wasn't to be.
Not necessarily. Mark Montoya, I thought, did a great job of calming him down in the middle of after the first round, but before the second round. But Fluffy immediately got a takedown in the second. Frimmed ended up getting on top though, got a guillotine, was looking for the arm triangle as well. And he probably won that round, but Fluffy Hernandez came out and got a takedown in the third. Big slammed in as well after that. He was winning the scrambles, he took the back. His cardio is just too much. This guy's cardio is insane, and I think it'll take him a long way in that division. And Frimmed was absolutely wrecked at the end of the third round, and Fluffy was still going. I'd love to see him over 5 rounds. Obviously, then we had Gary versus Weeks, which we spoke about. Pichel versus Madison, very close fight throughout it. I thought Madison looked way better than he did previously. What did you think of it?
I thought Michelle threw it away. He seemed to think he had the fight won after the second round and was kind of like celebrating already, and was over enthusiastic about getting involved in grappling sequences. I think if he had Marco Madsen tired, then he could have picked him apart on the feet and won the decision. But he just overdid it. I think got too confident and blew it.
I think both of them were so tired in that third round. The takedown for Madsen was almost inevitable. I just don't. I think when Marco Madsen, his striking has looked better, but I just think he doesn't go for the takedown enough. This guy's a 3-time Olympic wrestler. Like, go
he
for the takedown.
Even got taken down himself.
He did, yeah.
At the end of the second round, momentarily, anyway.
So yeah, I think we've spoken about this before. Even though he's younger than Bichelle, he needs that jump now, and this was a good jump, and the Guida fight was a good jump, but he needs another one. And I'd like to see him maybe getting someone in the top 15. But I think it's time for another.
Yeah, it's a good win. Like, it is probably time. Somebody low in the rankings.
Let's do it. Then Dern versus Torres. First round, very close. I gave it to Dern based on the more impactful shots. I thought she was landing more. I know the graphic came up and Torres had landed 15 more shots than her or whatever, but Dern was to me clearly landing the harder shots. What do you think of the first?
It's kind of like pitter-patter shots, a lot of them. It was a close round, but I can see why maybe people were, there's a lot of times as well where I'm going to mention it in one of the later fights where the commentator or the crowd react to a shot that isn't that big, maybe, or a sequence or combination that doesn't really land, and maybe that gets put into people's head as landing. But I thought Dern did enough in that round. But maybe if I went back and watched it with a fine tooth comb, maybe I'm wrong.
Where would one get a fine tooth comb? That's one of those John Gooden anachronisms.
10% speed.
Yeah. You used to do that before, didn't you? Like during slow motion.
Yeah, sometimes watch it back on 25% speed if just to see exactly what happened.
Yeah. Dern got a flying triangle in the second, and then got the body triangle standing. Almost got the Kimura double wrist lock at one stage. Do you know what? It's so frustrating with Mackenzie Dern as a proponent of jiu-jitsu like I am to see her getting to this locked on fucking leg lock position. She's deep in the hips, and she just takes her time and just sits there. Like, fair enough if you're a minute into the fight and you sit there and wait and boom, take her time. There's 45 seconds left on the clock. She is deep on that leg. Go for it.
She's acting like it's a 20-minute jiu-jitsu match here or something.
Exactly. She's acting like it's fucking Heist Gracie at UFC 6 or whatever it was, Oh my God, it's so frustrating. She's done that before as well, and she's ended up losing fights because of it, and this was so frustrating with Mackenzie Dern. Look, even though she did look much improved, I thought, I've said it before, but Mackenzie Dern, sometimes she comes out and her striking looks good, and she looks like she will keep going for a takedown all day, which she did here a little bit more. But I have no faith in her to do it the next time again. I don't know. It feels like Mackenzie Dern needs about 20 more fights before she'd be where we need her to be, kind of, because she's a very good athlete. She seems to be improving with the striking, as I mentioned. Obviously, her jiu-jitsu is unbelievable, but look, this is a big win. Dern won the third round. She landed a hook kick. She landed a bit of an up kick as well, but Mackenzie Dern has a lot of learning to do, and I think
Torres won the third round, no?
Sorry, what did I say?
Dern, yeah.
Torres won the third round, yeah. She was the one who landed the up kick, and I actually have it Dern here in my notes for some reason, but I'm an idiot. But yeah, it was obviously Torres, but yeah, 2-1 to Dern. Then we had Burns versus Shemaev, and the two title fights. Let's talk about Yan versus Sterling first. I'm almost not ready to talk about this fight. It was insane. Look, it all came down to the first round, I suppose. The second round, we'll go back to the first round in a second. The second round, Sterling ended up getting, I think it was a single leg, got his back, and he was dominant there. It was
Yan gave up his back pretty quickly. I was surprised he didn't go all out to not give up his back, but obviously Sterling is extremely, we've seen jiu-jitsu. It before.
I said it
many times.
I said it. He's jiu-jitsu in the fight.
His back taking is, like on a very high level, even for jiu-jitsu guys in the UFC. So maybe that was part of it, but it did seem like Yan gave it up a little bit easy in the third round as well.
Yeah. Look, Yan did defend well when it got there, but like anyone who's watched that Magomedov fight, you would think that Yan wouldn't give it up that easy, but he did. Like, it wasn't necessarily that he gave up the takedowns that easy, but when it got to the ground, Sterling took him really, really well. And I think that was something he had worked on going into the fight, obviously. And it was something that he knew was the winning or losing of the fight for him. And I talked about that coming into the fight, but I thought he would need to finish because to do it over and over would be hard. But he was able. And you know what? They said it like midway through, I think, with the 5th round, that he'd only gotten 2 takedowns in the whole fight. So it wasn't the thing he did over and over, really. Yeah. He just did it twice.
Once he got him down, he put on the body triangle and basically stayed there fishing for the rear naked choke. And it seemed like maybe Jan had, like, in the training camp had been like, okay, if I'm getting taken down, he's probably going to end up on my back and I'm going to defend the rear naked choke. And he just basically went into defense mode. But it seemed like, you know, he could have avoided being like controlled for 3 to 4 minutes of both the second and the third round. But you know,
doesn't it really go to our point as well, though? Do you know, where we always say keep going for that takedown. If you're a wrestler, if you need to fight to go to the ground, keep going. Like I think it was 2 of 19 on his takedowns, and those 2 won him the fight. Like, I think more fighters need to do that. They need to, if you're going to win the fight on the ground, concentrate on that takedown. Keep going for it. Don't just give up on it. If you have 10 failed attempts, go for the 11th one, you know?
Yeah. And I think we don't see the body triangle enough as well. Yeah. It's so much more secured in the hooks, you know. Timed correctly, people can spin in your hooks and end up on top, or they can kind of peel your feet, or 1 foot out and spin then. With the body triangle, it's really difficult to get out. And Jan was kind of turning the opposite way than he was turning towards the knee, rotating his body towards the knee. Maybe it was Sterling doing that, controlling his body, but he needed to kind of put pressure on the ankle, and he wasn't doing that. And if your opponent's not doing that, you know, Sterling's happy to hang out there for 3-4 minutes and hope you make a mistake and choke you out if you do. And yeah, I thought in the second round when he got the back with so much time that it probably would end up being a rear naked choke finish. But in fairness to Jan, he showed he has good very good rear naked choke defense and toughed it out. And you know, he seemed to think that he'd won the first round, so you know, maybe that was playing into his head as well. And obviously in the end, on the judges' scorecards, he didn't.
Yeah, so Sterling the exact same. He got a double leg in the 3rd round, on the back for the whole round. Jan was on top then for most of the 4th round. Didn't land much, but won the round. And in the 5th round, Aljo almost got a takedown, but Jan got up. Jan landed a hard knee that stung him. He controlled him on the ground for a minute. Aljo missed the takedown, but held on with Jan on his back as the round was coming to an end. I think it was a Jan round, not a blow away by any means. Like the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th were very clear. The 5th, I think, was a Jan round as well. It was that first round. Like honestly, I'll have to go back and watch it. But I think
the first round was the only one in dispute.
Yeah. Who'd you score for?
I actually scored it for Sterling. I think the commentators at the very end, literally 1 second to go in the first round, the commentators kind of screamed and the crowd screamed as if Jan had landed a big punch, but like from what I saw, that punch didn't land. If it did land, it was like landed on the arm or the shoulder or the glove and didn't do anything. Yeah. And before that, Jan was basically just following him around, not really effectively cutting him off, letting him kind of circle and eating the odd leg kick. And even in the first 30 seconds, ate a couple of half decent body kicks and ate a couple more and didn't really return that much. I think he landed 1 decent body kick himself, and the rest of the body kicks he threw were reaching. I think a lot of his Jan's punches were reaching in the first round. He couldn't get to Sterling. Sterling was moving too much for him, and I think Sterling did just enough with the tiny bit of success he had with the leg kicks and the body kicks. And you know, the punches either way nothing landed clean in my opinion.
I think Jan made a critical error in that round as well. He stopped switching stances to cut off Aljo with the hook. You know, as Aljo was going one way, he was hooking from one stance, and as he was going the other way, he was hooking from the other stance. And I don't know why, but he stopped doing it in the middle of the round. And I honestly think that lost him the fight, because if you land a couple of those hooks and maybe even one rocks him a little bit, you probably win that round if you're Jan, you know.
If that punch landed that the commentators and the crowd seemed to think did at the very end of the round, it was more the kind of the excitement and swinging probably from the crowd, but the commentators kind of, big left or big right, I can't remember which one it was from Jan. It wasn't but if that probably would have stolen the round and the fight and the belt. So like, this is a razor close round and a razor close fight.
Very, very, very close fight altogether. And it's one, look, you have to be happy for Aljamain Sterling winning it afterwards, because everyone, look, we doubted him. I didn't think he'd be able to win a decision. I think most people didn't, and he went out and he did it, and he put on a very, very good performance, and, you know, you have to commend him on that, of really good stuff. I thought it was a terrible performance from Jan, honestly. I didn't think he fought well at all. He didn't get
going until the fourth round.
I don't even think then he got going. Like, when did you see Jan landing any of his big impactful shots we talked about last week, the way he would win the fight?
Yeah, but he's worried about the takedown by that stage. Like, he knew how critical, like, you know, was to not get it taken down again.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and that deficiency, not deficiency, but the disparity in the jiu-jitsu games between the two of them, I think. Look, Shawnee called it, not to say I'm a genius or anything, not to say I'm a jiu-jitsu genius or anything, but the jiu-jitsu was the difference at the end of the day, and not all jokes aside, I actually think it was. And it was great for Sterling to be able to get it to that area and dominate in that area. But so, actually, how did you score the fight? Did you score any 10-8s? I know some people are scoring 10-8s. Or did you have it 48-47 Sterling?
I had a 48-47, yeah. I had all the, like, you know, Sterling had dominance in terms of position in the rounds, but he didn't do enough, any serious damage.
Do you know what's funny, though?
Any overwhelming, you know, damage.
On MMA decisions, I was the only person to score 48-47 Sterling. I thought that was crazy. I thought, like, and most people had Sterling winning. Yeah, I was the only person. I thought that was mad, and there was like 15 scores in or whatever. Like, most people,
I thought it was pretty clear cut 48-47 either way. Well,
me too, yeah.
Because it could have went either way, but like, exactly, I thought that was basically down to the first round.
Yeah.
Who won?
Loads of people gave a 10-8 in the second. Like, that was not a 10-8 by any means. Like, I didn't even think about a 10-8, honestly. And before the change, you know, people don't know about
what damage was there?
There was a bit of damage late. He did land some nice stuff late, and, you know, in the third, but just holding someone's back.
More than a normal 10-9 round. You know?
No, there was nothing. Holding someone's back for the whole round is not going to win you a 10-8 these days with the change. Like, it's changed now where you have to have overwhelming damage to get a 10-8. And now we're in Florida, so we'll probably have to consult with the judges or with the commission. They'll probably never tell us. But the judges are judging that way these days in America. You're not going to get 10-8 rounds like you got 10-8 rounds before. You have to note that, and you have to talk about it that way. I was very surprised because I don't know, did people get carried away maybe or something, but there was no 10-8 there. Even before the adjustment, I wouldn't have given a 10-8 in either of those rounds. But yeah, like, he
wasn't even like close to any finishes in terms of rear naked chokes. You know, he didn't have the arm under the chin at any time. Like, there was no substantial damage, and there was no he was about to finish the fight, but he was saved by the bell. There was nothing there that would have made me even consider a 10-8.
If you look at the 3Ds, as we always showed, or beforehand we should have looked at as well, he had the dominance and the duration, but he didn't have the damage enough. Like, and look, you consider it, obviously you can absolutely consider it 10-8, but I don't think he had enough damage, especially with the way the damage is being scored today. But that's I suppose another point for another day. But great stuff for Sterling. Wants to fight TJ Pillishaw next, as he called him hilariously afterwards.
Simple but effective.
Very effective, yeah. And, you know, I don't
consult your doctor before
consult your doctor, indeed. Be fun. The main event then was not as even a fight as that one. It was a domination, a destruction, a coming of age.
It was not even a fight.
It was so easy for Volkanovski. He was just so much faster. The one thing on the first line I have in my notes here, and I think it says it all about this fight, he was landing both in attack and in defense. Because every time he went forward, he's able to land. Every time Korean Zombie went forward, Volkanovski was able to land as well. He got a takedown in the first round. Zombie did get back up, but he was landing those like sliding left hooks throughout the first round. Zombie landed a couple of front kicks at the start of the second, and that was really it. Volkanovski just too fast, slipping out again. That like just a step slip outside of range to get away from Zombie every time was just fantastic. Volkanovski hurt him badly in the second, but Zombie did land a counter. Volkanovski got a takedown then, another one late, landed a few hard shots. Zombie was more confident, I thought, in the third, but it kind of caught up with him. There was a takedown in the middle of the round, but Korean Zombie stopped it in a heavy knockdown late. That to me was a 10-8 because you had the dominance, you had the duration, you had the heavy damage late.
And I thought he was finished. Like, I thought the ref could have, like, you know, it was borderline, but it could have been stopped, you know, maybe because his name is Korean Zombie, and, you know, you've seen him in kind of wars before. Maybe that plays into the refs, if it's smiling Sam Alvey instead of, the Korean Zombie, maybe the ref would have stopped it. But, it's obviously a title fight as well. So, this probably be the Korean Zombie's last title fight, and you give him every chance you can. And, he's got styled on basically. Like, maybe there was one moment, I'm not sure if he clipped Volkanovski hard or not, when Volkanovski kind of seemed to be dominating the striking, but then kind of went for a series of takedown attempts. Maybe he clipped him harder than it looked in that moment. But besides that, he was trying to like take one to give one, but he was just getting outclassed. The speed was just too much for him. Volkanovski was basically able to do whatever he wanted, and was able to just style on the Korean Zombie.
Yeah, an absolute domination. At the end of that the end of the third round, there was people kind of calling for the stoppage and the corner stoppage. As you said there, you have to know your fighter, you have to know the stage. It is his last ever title fight. It is the Korean Zombie who's come back from absolute, beatings before, and won. So I had no issue with them putting him back out there for the fourth round, but I was, we've criticised her before, but great stoppage from her.
Really good stoppage.
Great stoppage. Yeah, and he got hurt with a couple of shots, but before he took any major damage, Herb Dean get in there, he didn't even stop the fight, he just stopped Volkanovski.
I think he didn't say it, Herb Dean, but I think, I don't know what show it was a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, I think it was Mark Goddard said to the fighter, maybe I'm ballsing this up a little bit,
you're
but
right,
he said to the
fighter,
if this looks the same as the rest of it, if you don't change how this fight is looking in in the next 30 seconds or whatever, like this is over. And he didn't say it to Korean Zombie, but after that I immediately thought of that and thought, Herb Dean probably thought to himself, like, if this doesn't change, like, and then there was a clean 1-2 and it was like, all right, this is enough.
That might not necessarily be like rule book refereeing, but
common
it was smart,
sense,
common sense. And that's what you need in that. And look, Herb is credit where credit's due. He got the right decision here, absolutely. But still doesn't make him the best referee in the world or anything like that. But a very good decision here. It was a hard fight to credit Volkanovski after, because you kind of just felt so bad for the Korean Zombie in a way. But Volkanovski, this guy is an absolute monster. He's such a great fighter. Like, Adesanya, I think, is still above him on the pound-for-pound rankings, and I don't know how. This guy is 10 times the fighter Adesanya is. And I have a lot of respect for Adesanya. I think he's very good, but he's so well-rounded. His striking
10 times. Somebody put write an article about that.
Do it. Fucking, they'll be in the Mirror tomorrow or the Sun or one of them. He has the wrestling. He has the ground game as well. He has it all. He just has it all. I love watching Volkanovski, and this was your...
Isn't it enough for people outside of the hardcore fans to care? Do you think this is, a moment where,
I don't care about
guy, but, I'm sure Volkanovski wants to be respected and kind of, lauded for his skills and not be kind of forgotten about. And, who's he fighting? Oh, I can't even, people don't even know he's champion. Or
we went through years of that with Demetrius Johnson. And like, why give a shit about those people? Demetrius Johnson's one of the greatest fighters of all time, and his UFC career is ended now, and should we not have appreciated that while it was going on, just because some fucking casual fan in America didn't care about him? Fuck that. Like, let's appreciate a great fighter for a great fighter.
Oh yeah, we can, and we definitely do. Like, we've been talking for years about, continuously before his fights, about how underrated he is and how people should be excited because, all this stuff. But, in terms of him, he's kind of flying under the radar, even though he's going out there saying I'm the best UFC featherweight champ ever, and he's well on the way to proving that. Like, if he keeps going, like, there'll be no arguing. Like, and it probably just is another thing, like you mentioned with Demetrius Johnson, where it's the lighter weights and people just don't care as much for some unknown reason. That's beyond me.
He's beaten Holloway twice, and you think that, look, it's probably because it was close.
Every time Holloway fights, people can't shut up about how brilliant he is, and fair enough. Like, that's great.
People like Holloway, and because they beat, they robbed their guy Holloway. That's probably a reason why they don't like him, maybe. So
maybe he needs to get robbed in a decision to get people on board.
Probably would happen. But what a great card, an unbelievable performance from Volkanovski, an unbelievable performance from Sterling, and a great win, an unbelievable performance from both Burns and Chimaev. Ian Gary gets another win, and a very solid performance there. So, Mackenzie Dern takes a step forward as well. So all in all, a good card for the UFC. before I hand it over to Sean Sheehan to look at next week's cards, there was a bit of an Irish MMA update as well. Andreas Binder beat Rostam Akman and knocked him into next week with a ferocious right hand, and then maybe about 3 or 4 shots too many on the ground. The referee could have been in there quicker. Poor Rostam Akman, he's been knocked into the dark ages by both Ian Gary and Andreas Binder at this stage. A very, very good performance, Andreas Binder. I saw a few people saying they'd love to see him on Cage Warriors or something like that. I would love to see him. Get him on that Belfast card. It'd be absolutely fantastic. I'd throw him right in there against one of their very, very good, prospects at welterweight. I'd love to see him there. So a fantastic performance there. And Shauna Bannon as well, the severe amateur fighter of the year from last year. She won her pro debut at the weekend. She obviously came out throwing that front leg side kick and the hook kicks and everything like that. The fight quickly went to the ground though, but she ended up on top, and she was the one who got a bit of a hip toss. Won the fight on top in the first round. In the second round, got on top again and ended up getting the finish with ground and pound there. So very, very good win. Cage Legacy, the results are up on severemmed.com now from Queech Barrow, who was on site last night at that card. So if you want to keep up with Irish MMA, check it out there, and check out the Old Triangle podcast as well. They have a full breakdown of that next week. So we will leave it there, and I will throw it over now to Sean Sheehan to look ahead to next week's fights. Shawnee, take it away. Thank you very much, Shawnee. Okay, let's talk about some of next week's mixed martial arts. Obviously, we have a big, massive Bellator card, which has completely flown under the radar altogether. We have the UFC fight night as well. Let's talk about the Bellator card first, Graham.
The big, massive Bellator card, you mean?
Why? What did I say?
That's what you said, the big massive Bellator card.
Yes, the big
That's
massive.
That's what it should be known as, the big massive Bellator card.
No, it's not Bellator 277. It is the big massive Bellator card next week with AJ Mckee versus Pitbull. The undercard is maybe not as good as normal Bellator undercards, but you could forgive him. I haven't actually gone through and looked through every fighter yet, but I'm sure there are a couple of standout prospects there, but there are a lot of there's like a 1-0 versus 0-0 guy, there's a 2-0 guy versus an 0-3 guy, there's a 1-0 guy versus a 4-5 guy, an 0-0 guy versus a 1-2 guy. So I don't see it. Maybe there is one of those lads who are a standout. I know Tyson Miller, he at 2-0 now. He's fighting someone who's 0-3, he on Gracie, and he's he's had a couple of good wins on the
Gracie 0-3.
What? That makes no sense.
Surely you mean 3-0?
No. What, with jiu-jitsu working so well, it would almost
he's
have
wearing
to be,
a gi in his profile picture on Topology.
But anyway, your man, he's out of the same gym as Cass Bell, you know, like the 135 pounder. Tyson Miller is in Bellator, so Brian Moore was calling him out and stuff. So he's up at 155, 170. I think this fight is at 170. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to maybe see him. But this is all about the top few fights and some very, very good fights. Yakshimuradov, who I've watched a couple of times fighting for Bellator, he's fighting Tony Johnson now. He was supposed to fight, who is he? He was supposed to fight someone else anyway, and that fight is gone, and that's the fight that's happening now. He's a pretty good fighter, although he lost out in the tournament, so he kind of has to work his way back. Raheem Cleveland and Tyrell Fortune at heavyweight is, all heavyweight fights in Bellator are kind of not kind of heavyweight contender fights, but Fortune lost last time out to Vassell, and Cleveland, he lost last time out to Steve Mowry, who for me is the biggest heavyweight prospect in Bellator by far. So that's kind of a fight to kind of get back into the runnings there in that division. You have Daniel Carey against Gaston Bolaños. The guy I just previously mentioned, Linton Vassell, he's fighting Tim Johnson. You could really see the winner of that fighting the winner of Czech Congo and Ryan Bader for the title. 3 in a row now, Linton Vassell has won, so he's on a actually, very, very good run.
Before you go on, I don't know if I've told a story about Linton Vassell before, but it's funny. His training partner at the time, Fraser Opie, was fighting, this is fucking, 10 years ago, on a Cage Contender, and we were in the car. I think we were giving them a lift to the weigh-ins or something. It was that it wasn't organised that everybody had a bus or anything. So John Ferguson was like, "Oh, these guys in your car," and we were like, "Ah, yeah, go on." And it was Fraser Opie and his two coaches, and we were kind of, like, how's Fraser looking and all this stuff, and how are you feeling, Fraser? And the coaches just like, were basically just like, oh, this is, yeah, whatever, yeah, but this guy Linton Vassell, like, this guy in our gym, Linton Vassell, they just like completely dismissed Fraser Opie, and we're talking about Linton Vassell. This is years ago, before he'd really made like a name for himself. I just thought that was funny, that basically, like, he was sitting there about to fight in Cage Contender, and his coaches were basically like, didn't want to talk about him at all, wanted to talk about their other heavyweight prospect, Linton Vassell.
They probably heard your media members and were like, no, wait, hold on, here's the good guy. You need to pay attention to that guy. But they've been right too, haven't they? He's had a pretty good career. He's been around.
Yeah, they were right. Yeah, I just thought at the time it was pretty funny with Fraser Opie sitting right there in the middle of the back of the car.
He was there and all.
Yeah, he was there. Yeah, he was sandwiched in between the two coaches.
Poor lad. That's not very nice. There's always that, there's the next guy in the gym. There's always been that in MMA. He's the next one. There's probably someone else after. But anyway, the next guy go on, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's unrelated, but another story of fighters being in our car, being getting lift to weigh-ins was John Maguire and Luke Barnett, and another guy who's in the gym. I'm not sure if he's a fighter or just a gym guy. And it was before the Dave Hill-Conor McGregor fight, and they were like, they were talking down Conor so much, they were like, Dave Hill's going to destroy him and all. And myself, my mate Mooney was driving this like tiny little fucking banger, and they were all in there, and Luke Barnett's like fucking 7 foot tall as well. It was like something out of the fucking Simpsons. It was fucking hilarious.
Well, there are some good stories back then. I remember when we went to myself and Patrick went to the Cahill Pendred Shea Mills fight. Shea Mills like walked out in the road in front of the car when we were driving up. We nearly fucking caused the main event to be taken off by driving into one of the fucking main event fighters. But
we nearly killed Cahill's fake UFC contract that he got if he finished Shea Mills.
His UFC dream, but the only time I've ever travelled with someone was Cahill Pendred and Chris Fields got on the Lewis when I was on the way into the weigh-ins for that first UFC. And I remember Patrick like won the UFC game off of Cahill. He got like some free ones, and Cahill's like, I'll send that on to you there. And so as he was got in for his weigh-in, he was making 185 at that time, so he was he was a little bit more on it, I suppose. He didn't have too much weight to cut. But anyway, we could tell 1,000 to these stories, Greg. Let's get back to the card. Aaron Pico was supposed to fight Jeremy Kennedy on this card. He's only pulled out a couple of days ago, and he'll be now fighting Adley Edwards, who is obviously taking a fight in short notice, but he's a pretty good record, 9-1. He hasn't lost since his third fight. This will be his Bellator debut. He's fought he only fought
he was fighting kind of not very good guys up until his last two fights. He fought a 5-1 guy and an 8-1 guy and beat them both. So his last two fights, but before that he fought a 1-5 guy in his seventh fight. So this is definitely a big step up against Aaron Pico. The records may look similar, but we all know the prospect that Aaron Pico is. He's your boy, Sean, isn't he?
I'm interested to see what Aaron Pico does, because I talked to him before his last fight on the Bellator Media Day, and I kind of said what we were saying on the podcast about him, that he's one of those guys that came out too reckless at the start of his career. Then I almost think he got not reckless enough, if you get me. That's not the right phrasing, but you get what I mean. Like he was trying to stick to being a good, basic, fundamental fighter, which is great, as we spoke about with some of the
natural thing, I'm sure, though. Like when you just get sparked and you're like, I'm this wrestler, and everybody's like, why wasn't he wrestling? And you're just like, here, I'm gonna, strike less. I'm gonna play it safe, as you say. And it was probably a smart thing to do. And he's built himself back up. And they didn't give him easy matchups. Even off his losses, they could have given him easier layups if they wanted to, and he's worked his way to 9-3 now, and obviously his fight fell apart here, and he's expected to go in here and beat Edwards, but hopefully after this, 10-3, hopefully he can make a step up and we can see what he's really made of, because I am very interested to see. I don't want it to turn into an MVP thing where he's fighting these guys nobody's ever heard of for years. I want to see him step up, and I think impressive win here, even though it isn't against the opponent they wanted. It is time to start fighting more well-known quantities and more higher ranked guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I do give credit to Bellator for taking that step back with him. I think the matchmaking of Aaron Pico since that lost Adam Barrocks in 2019 has been the right way to go about it. They tried to send him to the moon. He lost to Corrales, he lost to Barrocks, he lost obviously Freeman in his debut. And it just didn't work out well for him. He turned into a 4-3 fighter to start his career when everyone was calling him, you know, the greatest prospect in the history of the sport and everything like that. It just didn't work. And, you know, sometimes the greatest prospect in the history of the sport needs 2 or 3 years to become that. And Aaron Pico didn't get that. But I'm glad Bellator have kind of stepped back and given it to him now. Like, Aidan Lee, a couple of fights ago, was a good test. Justin Gonzalez is 12-0 coming to the last fight. And he caused him a little bit of problems. And as I was saying, with the kind of the adjustment of the style, I feel like Pico, that's probably a performance he won't be as happy with in terms of, like, not getting hit and not being as careful and not being maybe as fundamental in his last fight. But in a way, I think it'll actually serve him well. He kind of needed to get hit a little bit. He needed to come through it a little bit. You can only be so fundamental. You can only be so, you know, defensive is the wrong word, but you get me. You're going to get hit in MMA, especially if you go to a higher level. And, you know, you're calling for him to have a higher level fight, and so am I, to be honest. But to have that, you need the ability to trust in all of your abilities, whether that is the offensive abilities with kicking and punching and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all of that, or your defensive abilities, stopping all of them, but also your ability to take a shot and your ability to be in a bit of a firefight, because sometimes you can't stop it. Your whole game plan might be to stop it, but sometimes you're going to get drawn into it, and you need to trust yourself. You need to be, you can't have those nightmares in the back of your head of getting flying kneed by Adam Barrocks and getting knocked out by Henry Corrales and Zach Freeman. You can't have that. You need to get hit a few times. And you also, if you want to be a top fighter, you need to get a bit of aggression in your game, if you get me. Like, you can't just be a good basics fighter. That won't take you all the way. You have to have a bit of dog in you. You have to have a bit of dirt in you as well to get to the very top. And I think Pico showed that in his last fight. And as you said as well, Graham, like, it's unfortunate the Kennedy fight fell out, but this is still, I think, a good test. It was literally, I think, only announced last night when we were recording this. So I haven't seen much of your man yet or anything, but he only fought, a week ago on that ex-MMA 4 card. So he's just come out of camp. He'll be ready for this fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's a big opportunity for him as well, because look, we've seen what's happened to Arma Pico in the past, and he's getting taken out by people. So, you know, if Adley Edwards can come in here and land a few shots at him, he might fancy himself to make an aim of Arma Pico as well. So it's definitely one to look forward to. The two top fights then, Vadim Nimkow versus Corey Anderson to end the tournament for the 205-pound title, and AJ Mckee versus Patricia Pitbull for the 145-pound title in the rematch of their very quick fight from last year. Let's talk about Nimkow versus Anderson first. And look, Corey Anderson has had a phenomenal run since he's gone to Bellator. Look, I think in the UFC he showed glimpses, but in Bellator, he is obviously, look, Melvin Manhoef, a bit of a layup for him. The Akshamuradov fight was a good matchup for him, but Akshamuradov is a good fighter. And then Ryan Bader last time out, knocking him out in 51 seconds. Ryan Bader, it did look a little bit like the ghost of Ryan Bader, if I'm to be honest. But Bader did go out and win a heavyweight title fight after that, so maybe not so much. Whereas last time, Nimkow almost got knocked out by Angliscus, but did go on to win that fight in the 4th round. Beat Phil Davis and Ryan Bader before that. Beat Davis a couple of times, in fact, and Carvalho and McGeary in there as well.
Just before you go on, on his day, as you said, he is a handful for anybody. If you look at the champion in the UFC, Glover Teixeira, his last loss is to Corey Anderson back in 2018. It was a decision. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened to the fight, but I can't really recall it too much. But that's a huge win. He's not maybe that consistent. He went out there and got knocked out by Jimmy Manuwa, and lost to Oven St. Preux, but like these guys on their day as well are good fighters, and obviously he lost to Jan Blachowicz as well. Blachowicz. So Melvin Manhoef wasn't the hardest fight coming into Bellator, but he got it done stylishly there, and as you mentioned, like beating Ryan Bader, he made Ryan Bader look terrible. We were thinking Ryan Bader was finished, and maybe he is finished at that weight, but he showed he can still do it at heavyweight anyway. So he's maybe not as much of the ghost of Ryan Bader, as you said, as we thought. So yeah, this is a really tough one to pick. Like Nimkow is on a serious run as well. You know, it's really hard to look good against Phil Davis, and maybe he didn't look good, but he beat him. He beat Lee McGeary. You know, he beat Bader himself as well. So this is a really tough fight to call. It, you know, might not be the most exciting fight. It might be, you know, very boring even. But yeah, it's a really tough one to call. It probably lean towards Corey Anderson, but yeah, it'd probably be a close decision, I reckon.
I think I'm leaning towards Corey Anderson as well, to be honest, even though I've great respect for Nimkow and his game. I just think maybe Corey Anderson's variation might win the fight for him. Now, Nimkow can hit very hard at times as well, but he's not a massive knockout artist. He doesn't have the fastest hands in the world, but he's a very good, straight-up technical boxer. If he needs to take you down, he can take you down. But Corey Anderson is very good wrestling as well. It's going to be hard to take Corey down. It's going to be hard to take Nimkow down. I do fancy this being like a 5-round stand-up kickboxing match, or as long as it lasts. And it's difficult with Anderson as well because of the level of competition I suppose he has had recently in Bellator. As you say, Graham, he's fought some way better fighters in the UFC, but will that level of competition actually have, or the level of wins, I suppose, have kind of upped his confidence and he will go in here and kind of go in fast and take out Nimkow? Or will it have kind of lulled him into a false sense of security and he goes in there with someone who I think is a genuine one of the top fighters in the world. Light heavyweight is a funny weight class because, you know, sometimes being the tougher, grittier, more, fundamental fighter, if you want to put it that way, if that's a word, as we've seen in the UFC over the last couple of years, has been the way to get to the top. It's not always the big, tough, athletic guys. And, you know, we'll see, I suppose, as well with Prochazka coming up, getting his chance at the title, if that'll quickly change. But I think this is an interesting one. Now, I think it's a very 50-50 fight. I haven't seen the betting for it yet, but I would be surprised if there's too much in it. I'm just about going for Anderson. I could change my pick by the time the fight comes, but I think it'll be a little bit more exciting maybe than you think. I think there will be some leather exchange in this fight. I think, you know, you could see both of them getting hurt. I could see some big shots landed throughout the first couple of rounds, and then maybe someone taking over as the fight goes. Also, I'd be very interested because if you look at if you look at Nimkow's record over the last few fights, the Anglickas fight, I think Anglickas kind of got tired in that fight. The Bader fight ended in round 2, as did the Carvalho fight. The Phil Davis fights are a bit weird because it feels like you don't need as much cardio for Phil Davis fights as you do other fights. I'd still kind of question if it's a war over 5 rounds and a close war, like those some of those fights I mentioned there. It was him dominating. If this is a close fought fight over 5 rounds, it'll be very interesting to see both of their cardios. Who maybe wins that fight late? If it's 2-2 going into it, will it be Anderson and will it be Nimkow? Like Nimkow's power could tell at that point as well. Look, it's a very, very intriguing fight to me, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I think, you know, Bellator have said they have the best 205-pound division in the world, you know, taking shots at the UFC, and whether you believe that now or you don't, that's up to you, but it's a very good fight, a high-level fight, and definitely one you could see at the top of a UFC card, so I'm really looking forward to that. And speaking of fights you could see at the top of the UFC card, a UFC card even, AJ Mckee versus Patricia Pitbull. Obviously, the first fight ended very quickly. AJ Mckee hurt Patricio and ended up choking him out with a guillotine inside of 2 minutes after to win the tournament, after beating Darian Caldwell and Campos, and he beat Carcanyon and Curran and Daniel Crawford, but before that, and our very own Brian Moore here over in Ireland as well. You know, Patricky has been on a run, beating Pedro Carvalho and Emmanuel Sanchez a couple of times, beating Michael Chandler as well, and Henry Corrales and a few more. Do you think it'll be a different fight this time, Graham, or do you think AJ Mckee will get him out there early again?
Yeah, I think it probably will be a different fight. I think it may go much longer, may even go to a decision. I see AJ Mckee winning and taking over, but I see Pitbull being a bit more wary early of the striking and kind of trying to figure out AJ Mckee on the feet and not really committing to much, and maybe it'll lead to some close early rounds or some not so exciting early rounds potentially as well. I see it going longer definitely than the first fight, but you know, Pitbull hits very hard as well, and AJ Mckee showed that he can stand with the best of them. And he can finish when the opportunity arises, and we've seen his grappling in the past. He's really good grappler, obviously, especially offensively. So Pitbull could land a big left hand or something like that, and it could change the fight, and that could be early. But I see AJ Mckee winning this fight. I see him probably winning a late, pretty sizable decision in the later rounds, or taking over in the later rounds, or getting a finish in the later rounds.
Yeah, like if you look at the last 4 fights for AJ Mckee, 3 of them have been won by submission, and George Carcanyon, he finished him with ground and pound early, obviously after that big left hook early. So even if you discount that one, 3 triangle armbar, that modified neck crank from the guard, and then the guillotine of Patricio as well. You'd look at AJ Mckee and, okay, I think he's kind of seen as this well-rounded MMA fighter, but mostly kind of as this varied stand-up fighter who throws at all different angles and is the new breed of fighter. But he's very much a finisher with his jiu-jitsu as well, and that's a massive part of his game that I think people kind of maybe have overlooked. He's choked out Daniel Crawford with an anaconda choke as well. That Brian Moore fight, he ended up getting a win with the rear naked choke there as well. And maybe he didn't have as many finishes earlier in his career. His first 5 fights were all won by he won 1 by submission, but the rest were won by knockout or all by knockout. So he's one of these guys that I think you have to look out for on the ground as well. But it was funny talking about the first fight. The question I asked you there, will you get to finish early? The first fight, I think most people are saying if it goes long, it'll be Mckee, and if it's early, maybe it'll be Patricio, and it turned out to be the opposite. But I don't know. Look, both of these guys are finishers. Both of these guys are top high level fighters. And I hope it goes a little bit longer, so we see a little bit of a good fight this time, I suppose. Not to say the last fight wasn't good, but it was a quick fight that we didn't see much of. Look, I think AJ Mckee will have to be, as I mentioned the word varied a few times on this recording already, and I think that's what he needs to be against Patricio. Like, Patricio comes in, he very much throws that jab and throws the right hand down after, right down through the middle, and hits you hard, and you know it and you can feel it. And that's the type of fighter he is. And look, if AJ can avoid that, if he can avoid taking that right hand over 5 rounds, I think he'll probably win the fight. I wouldn't be surprised if this time, if Mckee kind of implemented a little bit of wrestling, especially early in the fight. If you take away that power from Patricio, you take away a lot of his chances, as I just mentioned. And if Mckee, so sometimes you go into a fight and you are kind of expecting a big long fight, you're expecting a war, and then it ends as quickly as the last one did, and it's hard to know what to expect in the next one. I think in that sort of situation, you do what Christian Leroy Duncan did last week in the second round, and you go out and you go immediately for the takedown, and you kind of take away the speculation. You show your opponent and you show the world what's going to happen in this fight, and that you're going to dominate and that you're going to take this fight away from your opponent. And I think that might be something that AJ Mckee might do. Now, it's not that easy to go out and take down Patricio, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did that, honestly. But on the feet, who do you think is better on the feet, Graham? Because they're different type of fighters. Like Mckee, I think he throws more high kicks and more flying things, but he can go punch for punch, jab for jab, straight for straight down the middle as well. But that can be a dangerous game against Patricio.
Yeah, like if it was a pure striking match, I'd probably say Pitbull, but with the threat of the takedown, with everything mixed in, it's hard to say Pitbull after what happened in the first fight. But it was such a small sample size, and kind of selfishly, I would want to see this fight go a bit longer, just to see, more of where AJ Mckee is at. In terms of his all-round game, see him put in a few bad positions maybe, and see what happens there. But on the feet, it's really hard to tell. It's, as you said, it's 2 contrasting styles, and both guys are really quick, and both guys are really confident in their striking. Like AJ Mckee showed no. As you said before the fight, people were kind of saying it as grappler versus striker, but he showed no trepidation in going in and striking, and he has full confidence in himself. So I expect that to be the case again here, and maybe a punch will change his mind and he'll go more to the grappling, or maybe the game plan will be to grapple more. But I don't see it being a whitewash either way. I think early on, obviously one of the fighters could land a big punch and put somebody away, but as the fight goes on, I don't see somebody dominating on the feet. But with the threat of the takedown there, maybe AJ Mckee does have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing. As I said, I just hope it goes a little bit longer. I think I'm picking AJ Mckee as well. Maybe a late finish, fourth or fifth round, but it's going to be a top fight. Like, this is one of the best fights Bellator can put on. We said that the last time, we'll say it again this time, and it'll be very interesting to see where both guys go after this. Like, if Patricio loses here, his brother is a champion at the weight class above, and now he'll have lost twice to the champion, so it's a very difficult position for him. Whereas, for AJ Mckee, if he loses, okay, maybe you have the trilogy and maybe it's a little bit easier, but there'll be a new opponent. There's always talks of AJ Mckee to the UFC, it seems, but as a champion in Bellator, that's going to be a little bit tough. But it's a massive fight for Bellator. Hopefully the promotion gets going this week, because we really haven't heard much about it, to be honest. Like their biggest fight of the year, and we're hearing very, very little about it, but maybe they're waiting until obviously after the last night's big UFC card to start that. But very interesting card there, and I can't wait for it, Graham. We also have a not great card, I'm not going to lie, in the UFC next week. I'll actually have a couple of Sherdog shows coming out on this, and I went through, the prelims and the main card, all the fights. There are some good fights in this. I'll give you a couple of things that I think stand out for me. One standout fight is obviously William Knight and Devin Clark at heavyweight. Devin Clark has fought the who's who, a phrase I absolutely hate, but anyway, in light heavyweight, and they're both got up now in short notice to fight at 205. William Knight, 265. William Knight, a very, very good takedown artist with a big right hand after it. And William Knight is a guy, the big muscular animal who will be going out there trying to knock the head off Devin Clark. I think he'll get taken down a bit in that one. Jordan Levitt, even very good wrestler. There'll be a slam in that fight. He's fighting Trey Ogden, who is the Fury FC lightweight champion, I believe. So that'll be a fun one. Alating Haley, I was very impressed watching him. He's fighting Kevin Kroom out of James Krause's gym. Estela Nunes, who's a two-time Brazilian Muay Thai champion at 6-2. She's fighting Sam Hughes, who's lost, I think, 3 in a row now in the UFC. So it's a big fight for her. Penny Kanzad against Lena Landsberg. Philip O'Connor will be watching that one, I'm sure, from out in Sweden. That's a big fight for that country. I think Penny Kanzad will be favoured for that. Lena Landsberg, she just seems to get into clinches in all of her fights, and if she can avoid that against Penny, it'll probably be a bad time for her as well, so maybe she'll be looking for it. Chris Barnett is back. The most fun guy in the heavyweight division. He's fighting Martin Boudet, who won. He's fighting the Contender Series. This guy is, a big heavyweight, but is a very, very good fighter, and he looks like he could be a guy in a few years' time that we're talking about kind of climbing the ranks, maybe like Sergey Pavlovich or someone like that. Whereas Chris Barnett, we saw him knocking out John Vellante in his last fight with the big spinning wheel kick. Oh, what a guy he is. Jesse Ronson's back after failing the USADA test against Rafa Garcia, 2 hard-nosed 170-pounders there. Dragar Close against Brandon Jenkins. I think that's going to be a walkover for Close. Pat Sabatini, a fantastic wrestler, fighting TJ Laramie, who was 16 fights, Graham, at the age of 23. This guy is a highly lauded Canadian prospect. I don't think he's that good, though. I think Pat Sabatini is going to beat him. Andre Filo, who fought Miguel Pereira last time out, is fighting Miguel Baeza. A great fight. Absolutely loved that fight. Very impressed with Wan An Yu as well. She's fighting Maria Bueno Silva. Wu was a very, very good striker. Munir Lazez, what a fight that is against Aleki dos Santos. I absolutely love that fight. Both guys, I feel like, look, Zaleski can fight on the ground as well and has very good submissions and everything like that, but I feel like both guys are just going to be throwing bombs on the feet in that one. Kaui Barello Bahayo, he's even Bahayo, is a 10-1 Brazilian karateka, and he's fighting Gadzi Omar Gadziev, who is a 13-0 Russian wrestler, so you can probably guess how that one is going to go. And then in the main event, Vicente Luque against Belal Muhammad in a rematch. Vicente Luque absolutely knocked Belal Muhammad into the next fucking realm in their first fight, but that was a long time ago. They've both changed an awful lot since, and they're both very different fighters. How would you think that one will go, Graham? That was the best breakdown of a fucking card I've ever done in my whole life, but I'll throw it over to you for the main match, I think.
Did it at great speed as well.
Brilliant, doesn't it?
You're a real pro. Yeah, and you'd heard of some fighters I'd never heard of. So
well, I'm just only because I have to do it for Sherdog and I get paid to do it. So I'm like, okay.
Fair enough. You can take the compliment anyway. Yeah, Belal Muhammad and Vicente Luque. It's a real tough one to call, this one. You know, as you said, but I think Belal Muhammad has probably, you know, evolved more since the first fight, but he is smaller, I think, than Vicente Luque, and Vicente Luque does have a lot of power, and you know, a lot of people have been talking about Belal Muhammad as a potential, you know, title contender back before, and I never really saw him like that, and I think, you know, a lot of years have passed since then, and he's kind of reinvented himself, and he's got some good wins, but you know, Damian Maia and Wonderboy Thompson are his last 2 wins, and you know, they're a bit over the hill, and to be honest, maybe Stephen Wonderboy Thompson situation, that's a little bit harsh, but with Maia, I think that's fair enough. With Thompson, it's kind of trending that way anyway.
Wow.
I'm sure you'd agree, though, no?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, after that one, I would agree, yeah.
You know, and before that, like Diego Lima, Lyman Good, Sato, Curtis Melender, like they're decent wins, but they're, you know, they're not exactly the who's who, as you were saying earlier, of the division. So, this is a tough one to call. I think the win over Tyron Woodley, you could say the same thing about that for Luque. You know, it's maybe not the same win as it was a few years ago, but he had a very nice win over Michael Chiesa. So, I'd probably just lean towards Luque. He's beaten him before, and he probably beat him again. But this could be a really close fight. This could be a 5-round decision, or you know, this could go either way.
Yeah, I think I actually had Spence around me for the preview, and we already did it, and it'll be out during the week. But he was kind of saying on that or IDing on, sorry, with me, and he was kind of saying that the rise that Belal Muhammad has made since the first fight has been way bigger than the rise Luque has had to make, because they were at such a differential. They were so different in terms of level in the first fight, but who has reached a higher level at this time? And I think that'll be interesting to see. I would tend to agree with you. I think it'll be Luque as well. But like, the thing about Luque, he's such a finisher. I think his best shot is almost when he's countering, when lads are pushing him back, and everyone tries to push him back. And I'm sure Belal will do the same. He'll probably even try to take him down like he did with Wonderboy in his last fight. But look what happened to Michael Chiesa when he took him down. You know, he got submitted. So Vicente Luque can finish you anywhere. I think Belal is going to have to fight a very safe and a very good fight. Look, you can do that in all areas, I suppose, but which area do you do it in? I think in the stand-up, I think Belal Muhammad actually can outstrike him for large periods of rounds. Maybe not, you know, maybe not large periods of the fight, or maybe not multiple rounds, but even if he does, I think the power on Luque might be an issue. You know, we know how judging works. If you land, you know, 1 or 2 powerful shots in the round, even if your opponent has won the rest of the round, you're going to win it because you've landed.
Like if Belal Muhammad is on his bike, you know, throwing leg kicks and jabs and keeping away, and he gets hit with 1 big shot, then he's probably going to lose the round.
Exactly, and that's the way I think it could be for Vicente Luque in this. I agree with you. So I think it'll probably be a longer fight, and I could see a late stoppage. I don't know why for the last few weeks I've been thinking a lot of late stoppages here. Maybe we'll end up getting one this time around. But yeah, I think, look, Belal has improved an awful lot, and if he can get his wrestling game going here, and he can stay out of danger of the submissions, you know, he could absolutely tire Vicente Luque out, get a late stoppage himself, or win a decision, or even if he is on
I could see a scenario where he's stuffing the takedowns early, and then in the 3rd or 4th round, Belal Muhammad gets one, and Vicente Luque doesn't get back up, or he does get back up and looks exhausted, and the fight turns from there. You know, that I could see that happening too.
Belal has great cardio, like, and he's not one of these guys who gives up on things either. He'll keep going, he'll keep going, he'll keep going. So I think I think it's a very interesting fight. And look, there are ways for Belal to win. I think there are probably more obvious ways for Luke to win, but obvious isn't always the way it works out in mixed martial arts, so we'll have to tune in next Saturday night to see how that one goes. All right, we leave it there. Graham, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks everybody out there for listening. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud or Spotify, on Podcast Republic, iTunes, wherever, please just hit the subscribe button. If there's a thumbs up there, hit the thumbs up. Wherever you are, just do that. It's free. We'd be delighted with it. We'd be very, very grateful. And if you want more, Patreon, we have that as well. Patreon.com/Severe MMA Podcast. It's only a $5 a month. It's great. Honestly, I put a lot of work into it. A lot of the lads put a lot of work into it as well. And as well, the UFC preview show we do every Thursday, I think it's going to be midnight Irish time from now on, because Ian runs that and he's over in Canada. But wake up Friday morning, listen to it, or even Saturday morning as well, listen to it before the card. It's that preview show is really, really good. And obviously the Old Triangle as well. Check out that. You'll find it in all your podcast apps and on the Severe MMA YouTube as well. And also the Severe MMA YouTube, there's so much stuff on that over the last couple of weeks, from myself obviously interviewing Conor McGregor, to Jack Shore, talking to Harry, to Miles Price, who has a fight coming up. There's an Ian Gary interview up there with Tio, and there's loads more stuff as well. We have an absolute pile of stuff on our YouTube. If you're not subscribed there yet, please do. It's free, as we all know, and you can get a lot of stuff there.
Preview shows that we put up on this feed. Obviously, most people subscribed on SoundCloud would have got it. A lot of people listen elsewhere as well. So if you didn't, you can join us before nearly all pay-per-views and pretty much all cards, all UFC cards, and some other promotions, big cards as well, to preview the cards with usually 4 or 5 guests on there. And you can obviously get the audio version on the same feed you're listening to